Bridge to Terabithia, Chapter 12. Stranded. They walked slowly across the field and down the hill to the old Perkins place. There were 4 or 5 cars parked outside. His father raised the knocker. Jess could hear P.T. barking from the back of the house and rushing toward the door. "Hush, P.T., a voice which Jess did not know said. "Down." The door was opened by a man who was half leaning over to hold the dog back. At the sight of Jess, P.T. snatched himself loose and leapt joyfully upon the boy. Jess picked him up and rubbed the back of the dog's neck, as he used to when P.T. was a tiny puppy. "I see he knows you," the strange man said with a funny half-smile on his face. "Come in, won't you?" He stood back for the 3 of them to enter. They went into the golden room, and it was just the same, except more beautiful because the sun was pouring in through the southern windows. 4 or 5 people Jess had never seen before were sitting about, whispering some, but mostly not talking at all. There was no place to sit down, but the strange man was bringing chairs in from the dining room. The 3 of them sat down stiffly and waited, not knowing what to wait for. An older woman got up slowly from the couch and came over to Jess's mother. Her eyes were red under her perfectly white hair. "I'm Leslie's grandmother," she said, putting out her hand. His mother took it awkwardly. "Miss Aarons," she said in a low voice. "Miss Aarons, from up the hill." Leslie's grandmother shook his mother's hand, and then his father's hand. "Thank you for coming," she said. Then she turned to Jess. "You must be Jess." Jess nodded. "Leslie," her eyes filled with tears. "Leslie told me about you." For a minute, Jess thought that she was going to say something else. He didn't want to look at her, so he gave himself over to rubbing P.T., who was hanging across his lap. "I'm sorry," her voice broke. "I can't bear it." The man who had opened the door came up and put his arms around her. As he was leading her out of the room, Jess could hear her crying. He was glad she was gone. There was something weird about a woman like that crying. It was as if the lady who talked about Polydent on TV had suddenly burst into tears. It didn't fit. He looked around at the room full of red-eyed adults. "Look at me," he wanted to say to them. "I'm not crying." A part of him stepped back and examined his thought. He was the only person he knew his age whose best friend had died. It made him important. The kids at school on Monday would probably whisper around him and treat him with respect, the way they'd all treated Billy Joe Weems last year after his father had been killed in a car crash. He wouldn't have to talk to anybody if he didn't want to, and all the teachers would be especially nice to him. Mama would even make the girls be nice to him. He had a sudden desire to see Leslie laid out. He wondered if she were back in the library or in Millsburg at one of the funeral parlors. Would they bury her in her blue jeans? Or maybe that blue jumper and the flowery blouse she had worn for Easter? That'd be nice. People might snicker at the blue jeans, and he didn't want anyone to snicker at Leslie when she was dead. People came into the room. P.T. slid off Jess's lap and went to him. The man leaned down and rubbed the dog's back. Jess stood up. "Jess." Bill came over to him and put his arms around him as though he had been Leslie instead of himself. Bill held him close so that a button on his sweater was pressing painfully into Jess's forehead. But, as uncomfortable as he was, Jess didn't move. He could feel Bill's body shaking, and he was afraid that if he looked up, he would see Bill crying too. He didn't want to see Bill crying. He wanted to get out of this house. It was smothering him. Why wasn't Leslie here to help him out of this? Why didn't she come running in and make everyone laugh again? You think it's so great to die and make everyone cry and carry on? Well, it ain't. She loved you, you know. He could tell from Bill's voice that he was crying. She told me once that if it weren't for you, his voice broke completely. "Thank you," he said a moment later. "Thank you for being such a wonderful friend to her." Bill didn't sound like himself. He sounded like someone in an old, mushy movie. The kind of person Leslie and Jess would laugh at and imitate later. Boo-hoo! You were such a wonderful friend to her. He couldn't help moving back, just enough to get his forehead off the stupid button. To his relief, Bill let go. He heard his father ask Bill quietly over his head about the service. And Bill answering quietly, almost in his regular voice, that they had decided to have the body cremated and were going to take the ashes to his family home in Pennsylvania tomorrow. Cremated. Something clicked inside of Jess's head. That meant Leslie was gone, turned to ashes. He would never see her again, not even dead. Never. How could they dare? Leslie belonged to him. More to him than anyone in the world. No one had even asked him. No one had even told him. And now he was never going to see her again, and all they could do was cry? Not for Leslie. They weren't crying for Leslie. They were crying for themselves. Just themselves. If they cared at all for Leslie, they would have never brought her to this rotten place. He had to hold tightly to his hands for fear that he might punch Bill right in his face. He, Jess, was the only one who really cared for Leslie. But Leslie had failed him. She went and died just when he needed her most. She went and left him. She went swinging on that rope just to show him that she was no coward. So there, Jess Aarons. She was probably somewhere right now laughing at him, making fun of him like he was Mrs. Myers. She had tricked him. She had made him leave his old self behind and come into her world. And then, before he was really at home in it, but too late to go back, she had left him stranded there, like an astronaut wandering around on the moon, alone. He was never sure later just when he up and left the old Perkins place, but he remembered running up the hill toward his own house with angry tears streaming down his face. He banged through the door. Maybelle was standing there, her brown eyes wide. "Did you see her?" she asked excitedly. "Did you see her laid out?" He hit her in the face, as hard as he had ever hit anything in his life. She stumbled backward from him with a little yelp. He went into the bedroom and felt under the mattress until he retrieved all his paper and the paints that Leslie had given him at Christmas time. Ellie was standing in the bedroom at the bedroom door fussing at him. He pushed past her. From the couch, Brenda too was complaining, but the only sound that really entered his head was that one of Maybelle whimpering. He ran out of the kitchen door, down the field, all the way to the stream without looking back. The stream was a little lower than it had been when he'd last seen it. Above the crabapple tree, the frayed end of the rope swung gently. I am now the fastest runner in the 5th grade. He screamed something without words and flung the papers and paints into the dirty brown water. The paints floated on top, riding like a current in a boat, but the papers swirled about, soaking in the muddy water, being sucked down, around, and down. He watched them all disappear. Gradually his breath quieted, and his heart slowed from its wild pace. The ground was still muddy from the rains, but he sat down anyway. There was nowhere to go. Nowhere. Ever again. He put his head down on his knee. That was a stupid thing to do. His father sat down on the dirt beside him. I don't care. I don't care. He was crying now, crying so hard he could barely breathe. His father pulled Jess over onto his lap, as though he were Joyce Ann. There, there, he said, patting his head. Shh. I hate her, Jess said through his sobs. I hate her. I wish I'd never seen her before in my whole life. His father stroked his hair without speaking, and Jess grew quiet. They both watched the water. Finally, his father said, It's terrible, ain't it? It was the kind of thing Jess could hear his father saying to another man. He found it strangely comforting, and it made him feel bold. Do you believe people go to hell? Really go to hell, I mean? You ain't worrying about Leslie Burke, are you? It did seem peculiar, but still. Well, Maybelle said, Maybelle? Maybelle ain't God. Yeah, but how do you know what God does? Oh, Lord, boy, don't be a fool. God ain't going to send any little girls to hell. He had never in his life thought of Leslie Burke as a little girl, but still, God was sure to. She wouldn't have been 11 until November. They got up and began to walk up the hill. I didn't mean that about hating her. I don't know what made me said that. His father nodded to show that he understood. Everyone, even Brenda, was gentle to him. Everyone except for Maybelle, who hung back as though afraid to have anything to do with him. He wanted to tell her he was sorry, but he couldn't. He was too tired. He couldn't just say the words. He had to make it up to her, and he was too tired to figure out how. That afternoon, Bill came up to the house. They were about to leave for Pennsylvania, and he wondered if Jess would take care of the dog until they got back. Sure. He was glad Bill wanted him to help. He was afraid he had hurt Bill by running away this morning. He wanted, too, to know that Bill didn't blame him for anything, but it was not the kind of question he could put into words. He held PT and waved as the dusty little Italian car turned into the main road. He thought he saw them wave back, but it was too far away to be sure. His mother never allowed him to have a dog before, but she made no objection to PT being in the house. PT jumped up on his bed, and he slept all night with PT's body curled up against his chest. Chapter 13. Building the Bridge. He woke up Saturday morning with a dull headache. It was still early, but he got up. He wanted to do the milking. His father had done it ever since Thursday night, but he wanted to go back to it, to somehow make things normal again. He shut PT in the shed, and the dog's whimpering reminded him of Maybelle and made his headache even worse. But he couldn't have PT yapping at Miss Bessie while he tried to milk her. No one was awake when he brought the milk in to put it away, so he poured a warm glass for himself and got a couple of pieces of light bread. He wanted his paints back. He decided to go down and see if he could find them. He let PT out of the shed and gave the dog a half a piece of bread. It was a beautiful spring morning. Early wildflowers were dotting the deep green of the fields, and the sky was clean and blue. The creek had fallen well below the bank and seemed less terrifying than before. A large branch was washed up onto the bank, and he hauled it up to the narrowest place and laid it bank to bank. He stepped on it, and it seemed firm. So he crossed on it, foot over foot, to the other side, grabbing the smaller branches which grew out from the main one toward the opposite bank to keep his balance. There was no sign of his paints. He landed slightly upstream from Terabithia, if it still was Terabithia, if it could still be entered by crossing a branch instead of swinging into it. PT was left crying piteously on the other side. Then the dog took up his courage and paddled across the stream. The current carried him past Jess, but he made it safely to the bank and ran back to him, shaking great drops of cold water on Jess. They went into the castle stronghold. It was dark and damp, but there was no evidence there to suggest that the queen had died. He felt the need to do something fitting, but Leslie was not here to tell him what that was. The anger which had possessed him yesterday flared up again. Leslie, I'm just a dumb old dodo, and you know it. What am I supposed to do? The coldness inside him had moved upward into his throat, constricting it. He swallowed several times. It occurred to him that he probably had cancer of the throat. Wasn't that one of the 7 deadly signs? Difficulty in swallowing. He began to sweat. He didn't want to die. Lord, he was just 10 years old. He had hardly begun to live. Leslie, were you scared? Did you know you were dying? Were you scared like me? A picture of Leslie being sucked into the cold water flashed across his brain. "Come on, Prince Tarion," he said quite loudly. "We must make a funeral wreath for the Queen." He sat in the clear space between the bank and the first line of trees and bent a pine bow into a circle, tying it with a piece of wet string that he found in the castle. And because it looked cold and green, he picked up some spring beauties from the forest floor and wove them among the needles. He put it down in front of him. A cardinal flew down to the bank, cocked its brilliant head, and seemed to stare at the wreath. P.T. let out a growl, which sounded more like a purr. Jess put his hand on the dog to quiet him. The bird hopped about a moment more, then flew leisurely away. "It's a sign from the spirits," Jess said quietly. "We made a worthy offering." He walked slowly as a part of a great procession, though only the puppy could be seen, slowly forward carrying the Queen's wreath to the sacred grove. He forced himself deep into the dark center of the grove, and kneeling, he laid the wreath upon the thick carpet of golden needles. "Father, into thy hands I commend her spirit." He knew Leslie would have liked those words. They had the ring of the sacred grove in them. The solemn procession wound its way through the sacred grove homeward to the castle. Like a single bird across a storm cloud sky, a tiny piece winged its way through the chaos inside his body. "Help! Jessie, help me!" A scream shattered the quietness. Jess raced to the sound of Maybelle's cry. She had gotten halfway across the tree bridge and now stood there, grabbing the upper branches, terrified to move either forward or backward. "Okay, Maybelle," came the words, more steadily than he felt. "Just hold still, I'll get you." He wasn't sure that the branch would hold the weight of both of them. He looked down at the water. It was low enough for him to walk across, but still swift. Suppose it swept him off his feet. He decided to try the branch. He inched out on it until he was close enough to touch her. He'd have to get her back to the home side of the creek. "Okay," he said. "Now back up." "I can't." "I'm right here, Maybelle. You think I'm going to let you fall in? Here." He put out his right hand. "Hold on to me and slide sideways on the thing." She let go with her left hand for a moment and then grabbed the branch again. "I'm scared, Jessie. I'm too scared." "Of course you're scared. Anybody'd be scared. You just got to trust me, okay? I'm not going to let you fall, Maybelle. I promise you." She nodded, her eyes still wide with fear. But she let go of the branch and took his hand, straightening a little and swaying. He gripped her tightly. "Okay now. It ain't that far. Just slide your right foot a little way and then bring your left foot up close to it." "I forgot which one's my right." "The front one," he said patiently. "The one that's closest to home." She nodded again and obediently moved her right foot a few inches. "Now just let go of the branch with your other hand and hold on tight to me." She let go of the branch and squeezed his hand. "Good, you're doing great. Now slide a little ways more." She swayed, but did not scream, just dug her little fingernails into the palm of his hand. "Great, that's fine. You're doing just fine." The same quiet, assuring voice of the paramedics on emergency, but his heart was bongoing against his chest. Okay, a little bit more now." When her right foot came at last to the part of the branch which rested on the bank, she fell forward, pulling him down too. "Watch it, Maybelle." He was off balance, but he fell, not into the stream, but with his chest across Maybelle's legs. His own legs waving in the empty air above the water. "Whew," he started laughing with relief. "What you trying to do, girl? Kill me?" She shook her head in a solemn no. "I know I swore in the Bible not to follow you, but I woke up this morning and you was gone." "Yeah, I had to do some things." She was scraping at the mud on her bare legs. "I just wanted to find you so you wouldn't be so lonesome." She hung her head. "But I got too scared." He pulled himself around until he was sitting beside her. They watched P.T. swimming across the current, carrying him too swiftly, but he didn't seem to mind. He climbed out well below the crabapple tree and came running back to where they sat. Everybody gets scared sometimes, Maybelle. You don't have to be ashamed of that. He saw a flash of Leslie's eyes as she was going into the girls' room to see Janice Avery. Everybody gets scared. P.T. ain't scared. He even saw Leslie. It ain't the same for dogs. It's like, the smarter you are, the more things can scare you. She looked at him in disbelief. But you weren't scared? Lord, Maybelle, I was shaking like Jell-O. No, you're just saying that. He laughed. He couldn't help being glad that she didn't believe him. He jumped up and pulled her to her feet. Come on, let's go eat. He let her beat him to the house. When he walked into the basement classroom, he saw Mrs. Myers had already had Leslie's desk taken out of the front of the room. Of course, by Monday, Jess knew, but still, at the bus stop, he looked up, half expecting to see her running up across the field, her lovely, even, rhythmic run. Maybe she was already at school. Bill had dropped her off, as he did some days when she was late for the bus. But then, when Jess came into the room, and her desk was no longer there, why were they all in such a rush to be rid of her? He put his head down on his own desk, his whole body heavy and cold. He could hear the sounds of the whispers, but not the words. Not that he wanted to hear the words. He was suddenly ashamed that he'd thought he might be regarded with respect by the other kids, trying to profit for himself from Leslie's death. I wanted to be the best, the fastest runner in the school, and now I am. Lord, he made himself sick. He didn't care what others said or what they thought, just as long as they left him alone, just so long as he didn't have to talk to them or meet their stares. They had all hated Leslie, except maybe Janice. Even after they'd given up trying to make Leslie miserable, they'd kept on despising her, as though there was one of them, as though there was one of them worth the nail on Leslie's little toe. And even he himself had entertained the traitorous thought that now he would be the fastest. Mrs. Myers barked the command to stand for the allegiance, and he didn't move. Whether he couldn't or wouldn't, he didn't really care. What could she do to stop him, after all? Jesse Aarons, please step out into the hall. He raised his leaden body and stumbled out of the room. He thought he heard Gary Fulcher giggle, but he couldn't be sure. He leaned against the wall and waited for Monster Mouth Myers to finish saying, "Oh, say, can you see?" and join him. He could hear her giving the class some sort of assignment in arithmetic before she came out and quietly closed the door behind her. Okay, shoot, I don't care. She came over so close to him that he could smell her dime store powder. Jessie? Her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it, but he didn't answer. Let her yell, he was used to that. Jessie, I just want to give you my sincere sympathy. The words were like a Hallmark card, but the tone was new to him. He looked up into her face despite himself. Behind her turned-up glasses, Mrs. Myers' narrow eyes were full of tears. For a minute, he thought he might cry himself. He and Mrs. Myers standing in the basement hallway crying over Leslie Burke. It was so weird, he almost laughed instead. When my husband died, Jess could hardly imagine Mrs. Myers ever having a husband. People kept telling me not to cry, kept trying to make me forget. Mrs. Myers, loving, mourning. How could you picture it? But I didn't want to forget. She took her handkerchief from her sleeve and blew her nose. Excuse me. This morning when I came in, someone had already taken out her desk. She stopped and blew her nose again. I've never had such a student in all my years of teaching. I shall always be grateful. He wanted to comfort her. He wanted to unsay all the things he'd ever said about her. even unsay the things that Leslie had said. Lord, don't ever let her find out. So I realize if it's hard for me, how much harder it must be for you. Let's try to help each other, shall we? Yes'm. He couldn't think of anything else to say. Maybe someday when he was grown, he'd write her a letter and tell her that Leslie Burke had thought that she was a great teacher or something. Leslie wouldn't mind. Sometimes, like the Barbie doll, you just need to give people something that's for them, not just something that makes you feel good giving it, because Mrs. Myers had helped him already by understanding that he would never forget Leslie. He thought about it all day, how before Leslie came, he had been a nothing, a stupid, weird little kid who drew funny pictures and chased around a cow field trying to act big, trying to hide a whole mob of foolish fears running riot inside his gut. It was Leslie who had taken him from the cow pasture into Terabithia and turned him into a king. He had thought that it was. He had thought that was it. Wasn't king the best thing you could be? Now it occurred to him that perhaps Terabithia was like a castle where you came to be knighted. After you stayed for a while and grew strong, you had to move on. For hadn't Leslie, even in Terabithia, tried to push back the walls of his mind and make him see beyond to the shining world, huge and terrible and beautiful and very fragile? Handle with care everything, even the predators. Now it was time for him to move out. She wasn't there, so he must go for both of them. It was up to him to pay back the world in beauty and caring what Leslie had loaned to him in vision and strength. As for the terrors ahead, he did not fool himself that they were all behind him. Well, you just have to stand up to your fear and not let it squeeze you white. Right, Leslie? Right. Bill and Judy came back from Pennsylvania on Wednesday with a U-Haul truck. No one ever stayed long in that old Perkins place. We came to the country for her sake, now that she's gone. They gave Jessie all of Leslie's books and her paint set with 3 pads of real watercolor paper. She'd want you to have them, Bill said. Jess and his dad helped them load the U-Haul, and noontime, his mother brought out ham sandwiches and coffee. A little scared the Burkes wouldn't want to eat her food, but needing, Jess knew, to do something. At last the truck was filled and the Aaronses and the Burkes stood around awkwardly, no one knowing how to say goodbye. Well, said Bill, if there's anything left in that old place that you want, you're welcome to keep it yourself. Could I have some of the lumber on your back porch? Jess asked. Yeah, of course. Anything you see. If you want it, take it. Bill hesitated and then continued. I meant to give you PT, but he looked at Jess, and his eyes were those of a pleading little boy. But I can't seem to give him up. It's okay. Leslie would want you to keep him. The next day after school, Jess went down and got the lumber that he needed, carrying it a couple of boards at a time down to the creek bank. He put the 2 longest pieces across the narrow place upstream from the crabapple tree, and when he was sure they were as firm and even as he could make them, he began to nail on the cross pieces. What you doing, Jess? Maybelle had followed him again, as he had guessed she might. It's a secret, Maybelle. Tell me. I'll tell you when I'm finished, okay? I swear in the Bible I won't tell nobody, not Billie Jean, not Joyce Ann, not even Mama. She was jerking her head back and forth in a solemn emphasis. Oh, I don't know about Joyce Ann. You might want to tell Joyce Ann sometime. Tell Joyce Ann something that's a secret between you and me? The idea seemed to horrify her. Yeah, I was just thinking about it. Her face sagged. Joyce Ann ain't nothing but a baby anyway. Well, she wouldn't likely be a queen first off. You'd have to train her and stuff. A queen? Who gets to be queen? I'll explain it when I finish, okay? And when he finished, he put flowers in her hair, and he led her across the bridge, the great bridge into Terabithia, which might look to some with no magic in them like a few planks across a nearly dry gully. Shh, he said. Look. Where? Can't you see 'em? All the Terabithians standing on tiptoes to see you. To see me? Shh, yeah. There's a rumor going around that the beautiful girl arriving today might be the queen they've all been waiting for.